Welcome back to this latest episode of Japan's top business interviews. I'm your host, Dr. Greg Story, President, Dale Carnegie Tokyo Training. My special guest today is the country manager for Frontier Advisors, Yuichi Takayama. Takayama-san, thank you.
My pleasure.
So you had a career in a number of companies in Japan over the years, and you've been in different leadership positions over that time. But just give our audience a little bit of a background. What is Frontier Partners?
Yes.
Advisors, I should say, Frontier Advisors, actually.
Yep.
What does Frontier Advisors do? Give us your background of some of the leadership positions you've had so far.
Sure. Yes, Frontier Advisors is an Australian investment advisor. We have Australian pension funds as a client, and day-to-day we provide investment advices to those Australian superannuation funds, such as where to put money. Is that equity? Is that fixed income? Or within fixed income or within equity, which fund is suitable for them to invest in? So we accumulated investment advice experience in Australia for more than 20 odd years. And this time we are trying to sort of exporting our capabilities in Australia to the Japanese audience. And our aim in Japan is to help Japanese pension funds to achieve better investment outcome.
Okay. And so where did you start in your career, and what were your first leadership experiences?
First leadership experience, I have to say, when I joined Tokio Marine Asset Management in the UK back in 2008.
So your first experience was with foreigners in the UK.
Yes,
That's interesting.
Foreigners in the UK,
That's
yes.
interesting.
Prior to that, I used to manage equity portfolio for the Japanese pension client, working for a number of Japanese trust banks. And then the change happened in 2008 when I moved to Tokio Marine Asset Management, taking new responsibility to head up business development, covering Europe as a business region. So that was the first time, and
What was interesting about that? Because you'd worked in Japanese companies.
Sure.
You know the Japanese managerial system.
Mm-hmm.
You're educated at Chuo, so you've grown up in Japan. You got your MBA overseas. I know that. But when you started leading a team of non-Japanese, what was the challenge there? What was different?
That was a very scary experience for me on day one.
Okay.
Because the mandate was to establish the business development function from scratch. So I was the only person when I joined Tokio Marine Asset Management in the UK looking after business development, which means promoting Japanese and Asian equity product to European institutional investors. So the first step I did was to hire a salesperson or salespeople.
Right.
So I did many interviews. I met many people, many candidates. And eventually I created a team of 3. So including myself, the team was 4 salespeople trying to introduce new product to the European institutional investors.
How was that though? Because, I've been hiring people in Japan now for decades here, and Japanese people, generally speaking, are not used to changing jobs much. Therefore, they're not really used to doing job interviews very much. And they're not very good, to be honest. They're usually not very, you have to, as the interviewer, you have to really work hard to find out if this person is actually any good or not.
Sure.
In the West, it's the opposite problem.
Yep.
They're all really good at the interview, but maybe not so good at the job, because they're used to changing jobs. They're used to doing interviews. So for you, how is that? I'm wondering if you met a whole bunch of very smooth-talking foreign salespeople and trying to get the job and trying to work out, well, who's for real here. How is that process for you?
I think your point is very important and valid, that those people are very good at taking interviews. and they are looking for the sales position. So generally, they were really good. One thing which was a bit different on my side comparing to other Japanese experts, because I was seconded to the UK as an expert, but I have two daughters, and my intention was to give them an education outside of Japan. So my intention was to stay as long as possible in the UK. So I was not thinking to go back to Japan after spending 2 or 3 years. So I can show them my long-term commitment that I'm so serious about this business. That helped me to attract some good prospects, because they might see me. If I say, I'm a expert and I'm looking to go back to Tokyo in 2 or 3 years' time, then they might say, okay, this guy is not serious. But because of my background, personal background and personal reason, I could show my strong commitment in this market and the business. So that's why I could somewhat persuaded some good talent to be more serious and engaged in the project which I was about to start. But interviews are very, very difficult, and I made many mistakes.
So how do you differentiate? Because I was saying, generally speaking, foreigners are pretty good at presenting an image of themselves, and, talking about how great they are.
Sure.
And so how do you differentiate? How do you choose, between all these very talented people who are quite good at promoting themselves? Yep. Which one do you want? How did you work that out?
Yeah, I think I took a benefit of being Japanese, because Japanese people are quite good at analysis into detail. So they can talk about general stories. But when it comes to very specific questions, if they are not doing properly, or if they haven't done that particular project on his own or her own, then there are some questions they can't answer.
Okay.
So stuff like, if the person said to me, I did business in, say, Middle East, then my question is, which part of Middle East, which fund, who was the main contact? So if you dig down into detail, I think the truth will be revealed.
Okay. All right. And so how long are you in the UK managing this team?
In total, 15 years.
Wow. Your children definitely got an education in the UK.
Yeah. But eventually they came back to Japan for university.
15 years, long time. So what's your experience there over that 15-year period of time? Because I imagine you had a number of foreigners working for you. What did you find you had to adjust or adapt or change to lead foreigners compared to Japanese? Because, Japanese language, it assumes a lot without being very specific.
Yep.
There's a lot of understood elements in the culture.
Yep.
There's a lot of contextual things in the culture which aren't spoken about, but which everyone gets it.
Yep.
But in Western countries, it's not like that. There's no great context, and things are not understood. And you've got to be very clear what you want. Otherwise, people don't get it. So what were some of the challenges of leading foreigners then?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And, there was no shortcut. So I tried to make myself very clear. So I used simple language, short messages, and, anyway, English is my second language. So if I use the long sentences, then maybe I lose the context. So I try to make everything short and precise and simple. That worked sometimes, that didn't work sometimes. But I couldn't find any other ways to communicate with the local British people. And probably it worked, I guess.
And I'm assuming, many countries in Europe are very cosmopolitan. They have people from different countries. working in different places. So presumably you had more than just English people.
Sure.
Maybe you had Europeans as well.
Mm-hmm.
Did your team actually expand to include representatives from other countries in Europe? Because you had a Europe remit, no?
No, we just had a team in the UK, in London. But we had a affiliation in France, and I think my successor did a similar arrangement in Italy. So we used the third-party agent to promote the product outside of the UK. I also had a very strong connection with one Israeli person who actually brought many assets to the company. But as you said, even in the UK, my team used to have a person who I think who speaks good Italian. I think he was an English gentleman, but got educated somewhere in Italy. So and one lady came from Indian background. So it was truly a multicultural background. And it's not always easy to manage multicultural organization.
What was particularly difficult about managing a multicultural workforce?
Yes, basically standards are different. So some people has a very strong focus on accuracy because of his or her personal or cultural background.
They would be the Japanese,
Japanese
I would imagine.
or
Like
some
example,
people from northern part of Europe, because our business partner in Luxembourg was domiciled. Their country was domiciled in northern part of Europe, so they were very, very conscious about accuracy. So one thing which is a big issue when I was managing the team was making the standardized, making the standard the same. So this is a standard we are trying to achieve, and this is a standard we shouldn't compromise. And that message is one big step to unify the team. Because if the aim and the target is unified, and if we are looking for the same direction, the team works. But if really, if I leave everything to them for their discretion, probably the end result is going to be quite chaotic.
And then you came back to Japan after 15 years, right? And were you running a team when you got back to Japan?
Yes, I stayed the same company for 3 years.
So here's the question.
Contract. Yeah.
You spend 15 years overseas, international environment, learning lots of different things that you'd never learn in Japan because it's a different country.
Sure.
What were some things you brought back with you from Europe as a leader in Japan that you thought, oh, I've learned something here. I can see where I can use this in Japan. I can apply it. Or it was just so totally different. It was like I had to give all that up and have to go back to being very Japanese about my way of leading. How did that work?
Wow, that's also a very good question. Yes. Yeah, firstly, the reason why I came back was my job assignment. I got the new assignment in Tokyo. So, and at that time, my whole family had already come back to Japan for the educational reason. So, there was no reason for me to say no. So I came back. Actually, it was shocking to me because I spent a good 15 years outside. So even, me as a Japanese national, the cultural difference was just shocking.
Right.
And
what was shocking? What was so shocking?
Yeah, and also...
You grew up here. I mean, it shouldn't be that shocking. What was shocking?
First thing was there were too many meetings. Maybe something to do with the way the Japanese organization is managed. That was very shocking, and some meetings are not relevant to my business. But because of my position, I needed to attend some of those meetings which are not relevant to me. And also, when I was outside of Japan, even though the team was small, but I had a full discretion to run the team. Absorbed in a large headquarter organization, my discretion was quite limited. Even though some people said to me, that's a big position, congratulations, but just thinking about the area which I can demonstrate my discretion, I felt I was a bit constrained. So being a local outside leader outside of Japan, I then recognized the huge benefit of taking the 100% discretion to run even small organization.
You had power and control of what
exactly,
you're doing.
yes.
Yeah. And in terms of motivating people, like getting, when you're in Europe, you have to get people engaged. Now, you had the option of selecting the people, which is fantastic. When you come back to Japan, I'm guessing the team's already there.
Yep.
And then you turn up, right? You're this Japanese foreigner who's disappeared for 15 years. Somebody else selected them, not you. So how is that to get the Japanese team engaged? Because you come back as a senior person, that's fine. You've been away for a long time, that's fine too. But you still got to get them engaged. And what was the contrast between getting foreigners engaged to follow you as a leader and getting a Japanese team engaged to follow you as a leader? What was the contrast there?
Yeah. Yes. Luckily, my team in Japan was small. And I had to look after the teams outside of Japan. So my successor in the UK actually reported to me in Tokyo. So the function I had in Tokyo was to manage and orchestrate all those international activities. So relatively speaking, the team was small. If I remember correctly, I only had 5-6 people reporting to me. And generally speaking, these people are very young because it was international business in the Japanese organization. And also asset management industry is not that internationalized. So, basically the firm allocated young people or those who really are keen to work for the international side. So their mindset is not typical Japanese.
And they chose young people because presumably their English was better?
English was better.
Yeah? More flexible maybe?
Yeah, and also their sort of desire to work outside of Japan some days.
All right, okay.
So I was lucky to manage the people who can share the same aspiration, go outside from Japan. So I didn't feel as if I was a foreigner coming back from the UK working for the Japanese entity. And they actually admired...
You'd be a role model for them.
Probably, yeah, in some sense, yes.
Because, one day I can...
Yeah, I want to run the company.
I can run the operation overseas too.
Yeah.
What about, say, contrasting the way you'd engage a European group of staff and the way you'd engage a Japanese group of staff? What things worked? I mean, I don't know how you did it in Europe, but tell me how you did it in Europe and then how you did it in Japan. What was the way of doing the engagement there with people?
Yeah. When I was in the UK, it was clear to me that those salespeople are looking for bigger salary or bigger bonus. So, and in general, salespeople working for the asset management industry, they are very conscious about the result and the financial remuneration. And that's why they moved around. And, they change job and company quite frequently. So at the time we started the venture in the UK, the Japanese equity was the most unliked product because that was in 2008, 2009. Every year
Lehman
we
shock.
had a Lehman shock, and soon after that we had a new prime minister every year. We had a great earthquake in 2011, so the asset class was not in favor. On the other hand, Asian equity was quite popular, and the firm had a very strong performing Asian product. So, even though I didn't do much to motivate them, they got motivated to have seen a good product coming out of Asia. And Asian equity was not as popular as now. And only a few companies actually won the big mandate from the investors. So they clearly saw the big opportunity there. So my role in the UK was to guide them to the right direction and also keep their expectation to the right level. Because sometimes they expect too much. Okay, we can do this, we can do that, we can create this vehicle, we can create this vehicle. But because, it's a new venture and we are not like Goldman Sachs, so the resource was constrained. So my sort of role is to control their expectation without jeopardizing their motivation. So it was a
difficult balance.
Balancing act. Yes.
Difficult balance. Yeah. How about for the Japanese team? How did you get them engaged?
Yeah, I think probably in a simple way, the other way around, because they know what they can do because they are working for the mothership. So they know their resource, they know their constraint, they know their challenges. So I don't have to control their expectation. What I had to do was to encourage them to be more proactive and forward-looking and to be brave.
More adventurous, maybe.
More adventurous, yes.
So calm the adventuresome foreigners down
exactly.
and get the Japanese to be more adventurous.
In a simple way.
In a simple way, yeah. I can imagine that. And often, when you rise in the ranks, you have a lot of experience, you have a lot of insight, you have a lot of information. So we often tend to have a lot of ideas on our side and we guide people. But did you find anything useful to get ideas from people from the bottom up? And let's contrast UK. Let's contrast UK and Japan in terms of getting ideas from the bottom up. What worked well in each case?
Each case. Yeah, that's very difficult question to answer, to be honest. From my Japanese experience, I had one young person who wasn't that good at English, but he was very keen to do business with some Asian investors, and because Japan is quite close to places like Taiwan and Korea. And he thought English is going to be less of an issue when doing business in places like Korea or Taiwan, because anyway, English is their second language as well. So he did a lot of research and he made a proposal to me that we should go to Korea. And actually, I thought his presentation was a little bit poor, but in order to encourage them, I didn't deny anything and just give them one shot. I give him one shot, and we made a trip to Korea. And then, because he worked really hard, actually, there was another chance. So that created a sort of benchmark to be shown to other people.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was one success case from my experience in Japan.
If you want to be successful as a leader, do the Leadership Training for Managers course. All companies need people who can both manage and lead. Leading people screams out for real skills in communication, dealing with all different types of people, being excellent at innovation, planning, delegation, handling mistakes, doing performance reviews really well, and inspiring and motivating the team. Do the Leadership Training for Managers course now in either Japanese or English. Leading is easy. Getting people to follow is the hard part. That is a great quote from Yogi Berra. Surprisingly, despite the complexities of leading here in Japan, everyone has to work it out by themselves. Foreign leaders want practical, applicable, expert advice. This is now available for the first time in history. Grab your copy of Japan Leadership Mastery on Amazon today and avoid the mystery, trial and error, especially the errors. Well, just on that point,
Yeah.
that was a success story. Okay, so he wanted to try something new. It worked. What would you have done if it hadn't worked? Because the point there is, he was a good role model for others to be more adventurous, right? So you want them to be more adventurous. It doesn't work. It doesn't actually go anywhere. How do you compensate that with keeping them adventurous? Well, how would you have handled that if it hadn't worked?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the knowledge and the experience of the leaders. We need to understand how much effort he or she puts in that project or presentation. So when I saw his presentation for the first time, I thought that was very poor. But because I could see his dedication and the amount he put into that presentation pack, so I, subtly gave him some advice, and that actually worked. But the key point is that as a leader, I needed to understand how much effort he put in that presentation pack. So the flip side is there are many other proposals which came to me during my tenure working as a leader of that organization. I saw some presentation without doing enough research. I turned it down, saying that this is not enough. So, and also it comes down to the standard. That person who was successful, he put the higher standard for his business. The others probably didn't the same. So when you take a look at the accuracy and detail of the presentation, it tells the difference, and that's very important.
So how about in the case in the UK? How did you get people, I mean, you mentioned they're motivated by money, that's given, right? But in terms of ideas, you were saying that they were very keen, let's do this, let's do that. So in fact, you're trying to control their enthusiasm. So that's a tricky one, because when people are enthusiastic, yeah, we can do this, we can do that, you say, no, right? No, we're not doing that. We don't have the resources. No, we don't have the time. No, we're not going to go that route. They get demotivated, they quit, and they leave, right? They go somewhere else. So how did you handle that side of things where you couldn't support them perhaps in what they wanted to do in terms of keeping them motivated?
Yeah.
And not quitting, actually,
Yeah, to be honest, I had a very tough time handling that difficult issue. Because at the time we started the project or the venture, we didn't have enough knowledge and enough experience to say this is the right way or this is the wrong way. So it was all try and error. And also that at the time we launched the project, it was a very small project in a large Japanese organization. So the resource allocation was not that great. So we definitely had a resource constraint. So I needed to come up with a very practical and realistic plan, which might be different from their expectation. But in order to avoid demotivating them, I gave them the long-term story. So if you create this in year 1, this may come in year 2. If you create this in year 2, this may come in year 3. So that's the only way to keep their motivation within a very resource constrained circumstance, because I couldn't promise anything I couldn't do. Like, okay, we can create 5 funds in Europe. We can create 10 funds in Europe. We couldn't do that. So I just said, okay, why don't we focus on this one first? This Japanese fund first. Once we raise a certain amount, then I'll negotiate with the team in Tokyo to create another fund in this district, and then we can expect this amount of business. So it's going to be quite a building block. And actually, I have to say, some people left.
Oh, really? Yeah.
They didn't like
Too slow,
too gradual, opaque, and there's no guarantee. So, the height at that very early stage of the project, the turnover was quite high.
Really?
Yeah. It was also a very painful experience, but I learned a lot. It's really difficult to motivate people and keep the motivation if the resource is constrained.
And things like trust is important everywhere.
Yes.
One of the advantages you had in the UK was you hired them. So the degree of trust is high because they've decided to quit where they are now and come and join you, work for you. That's a pretty high trust. Japanese team, young people, as you mentioned, or people very specialized in international business. How did you go about establishing trust with them? What did you find worked well to build trust?
It's also quite difficult and somewhat very soft, but I try to make myself very transparent, not hiding anything, and sharing everything I have. So clearly,
well, just on that point, do you think if you'd stayed in Japan and you hadn't spent 15 years in the UK, would you have been a different type of leader if you just stayed here in the typical Japanese system and you would have shared everything the same way? Or maybe you wouldn't have shared everything if you'd stayed here. Does that sort of that experience influence you in the way you approach the Japanese team by being more open, or it wouldn't have made a difference? You would have done that anyway?
That's very difficult to answer because
I'm giving you nothing but difficult questions today, Takayama.
Exactly.
I'm sorry about that.
It may be something to do with my personality, or so I might be quite open to other people, even though I didn't go to the UK. But I think the UK experience definitely changed my way of doing things. So, and also this is to do with the English language. As you mentioned, English is a very direct language, so there is no something in between. And in contrast, the Japanese is a language of making everything so opaque.
Very circular.
Yeah, and nuance is very important. So I see myself change when I start speaking English. So I had a similar sort of comment from my Scottish friend when I was in the UK, and he speaks German along with his mother language, which is English. And he said, when I start speaking German, his sort of attitude and way he expresses himself changes. And actually, that also happens to me. So when I speak in Japanese and when I speak in English, probably people can identify some sort of change in my behavior or expressing things.
Happens to me too. Yeah, I'm quite direct in English, but if I swap over to Japanese, it becomes less direct.
Yes.
I think part of that is the vocabulary. I mean, English language has something like 300,000 words or some amazing number of words, huge number of words compared to most languages, because it's, got Scandinavian language, it's got German, it's got Latin, it's got Italian, it's got French, it's got a bit of everything, Indian, etc., right? Whole world. But Japanese language vocabulary is not that big. And when you're learning a different language, so your vocabulary is not that big. So you're sort of forced into a smaller range of words you can express your thoughts with compared to your mother language. So I think that also constricts how we can speak in the foreign language as well, doesn't it? Makes it. I would obviously, I think, compared to a Japanese person, speak much more directly in Japanese than a Japanese person because they've got more nuance and more capability. But I know it's less direct than when I speak English.
Yes.
I've got a bigger vocabulary. Yeah. And so in terms of other things you found worked well to build trust, what other things worked well for you in Japan or in the UK?
Yeah, and also this is also, this might not be the direct answer to your question, but when you talk to non-Japanese people for over dinner or over lunch, they talk a lot about their families, their personal life. I don't see similar situation when I have a dinner or lunch with the Japanese counterparties. They talk mostly jobs, business, the organization. So actually I swapped the agenda for the lunch and the meetings. So
in Japan, you mean?
In Japan and in the UK as well. So in the UK, I talked a lot about the business. I talked a lot about what's happening in Tokio headquarters and give them a sort of insight about where we are going to. Not just talking about cricket or football. Whereas in Japan, I try to talk about my personal life, my family, my hobby, what I did for my recent holidays. I think in order to build up trust, you need to personalize in Japan, and probably the other way around for outside of Japan. So you need to be a little bit more formalized in order to treat them as a true business partner, not just subordinate.
It's interesting, in Japan, working different organizations here, sometimes, because you have personal name, in your case, Yuichi, and family name, Takayama, sometimes you ask colleagues, because you got to send an email or something, what's Suzuki-san's personal name? They don't know.
Right.
Personal name. Because everyone's Suzuki-san, right? As opposed to you in this case, Yuichi is a personal name. And that's like always surprising to me. Like, you don't even know the personal name? I can't remember it. Just the different.
Yeah.
And I find that too, that someone's getting married. You won't know about it till after the marriage. And it's like when it's completely fixed, certain, yes, then I'll tell you. Or they have children and they've had a baby. You don't know about having a baby till after they've had the baby, right? They keep everything very, I guess, Japanese control of information, but also if marriage falls apart, for example, you lose face or there's some tragedy with the child, they don't want to share that, So like that buffer.
Yes.
I find there's much more of a buffer. And as you're right, I don't have much experience about people's personal lives. They don't share. They don't share much about their personal lives, So it's quite more formalized in Japan in many ways.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And what about culture? Because you have, the company culture, big umbrella culture. Then you have national culture, in this case, UK culture or Japan culture. And then you have Takayama culture, how you like things to be, how you want to run things. And as you say, you had more scope to have your own culture in the UK because you had more control there. But still, even in Japan, you have some degree. You can have your angle on it or your flavor to it or something. What do you think it works well to drive your own culture in the organization?
My own culture. I didn't thought much about my personal culture.
But I mean, in the sense of, you have standards, you have expectations, you have experience, you have a view on how things should be done or where we should go.
Sure.
And that you drive your leadership from that idea, which creates a certain type of culture in your team. And another leader would have it maybe different view set,
Sure.
and they'd drive a different direction, have a different type of culture. So, but we have to operate under you can't go against the company culture, you get fired, and you can't go against the national culture because that isn't going to work. And then you've got your own view on it. So how do you get those things to sort of work together?
Yeah. I think I have one belief that, which is how asset management industry should contribute to the society.
Okay.
And also how the investment should be done.
All right.
And so I don't know much about the current status in the UK, but when I was there, if the person believes in value investment, that person can only work for the value company or value-oriented company. If the person is believing in growth strategy, then that person can only work for the growth-oriented investment company. So I think there is necessity for a person to believe what the right investment method to join this industry. Otherwise, they'll lose a sort of direction. And that's not good for creating and accumulating good career.
I guess also, if you're a salesperson, you've got to believe what you're selling.
Yeah, exactly.
To be successful and convincing, you have to believe this is good for people, the client.
Yep.
And if you don't think growth is the right investment, it should be value. Very hard to be convincing with the buyer.
Absolutely.
You're constantly living a lie.
Yep.
So it doesn't quite work, right? It's got to line up for how you come across to people, I guess.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of, what about Japan though? In terms of,
It's the same. So in Japan, I also echoed the same sort of thesis. So I sometimes asked questions like, what's your best investment? What is the best investment method? Where to put your personal money? And that's a question I can see what this person is believing in. So if the person is believing in, say, things which we are not dealing, then I didn't say this, but my advice is to look for another company to work for, because it's not happy. It's not happy ending, and keep on telling a lie to the client is very, very painful experience, and that's not sustainable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's sort of exactly. The belief is not there. Any other aspects of culture could you bring something from the Japanese culture to the UK? Could you bring something from the UK culture to Japan? Is there anything you could transfer across? You talked before about being adventurous. That is a culture. But apart from that.
So for UK people or for UK people, European people, I showed how diligent those Japanese colleagues working for achieving high accuracy. And I'm not telling them this is good and you're bad. It's not good and bad, but this is something you can consider. And because there is a local business practice for every country, every region, so importing the different way is not always the best. But sometimes, just looking how the others are doing may come up with some different and effective way to do business. So I encourage them to talk mutually. And also this is something I'm also doing at the current company. I'm sending a lot of messages from Tokyo to Australia. And some Australians are responding to me, oh, this is interesting. And actually, last year, I had a few staffs who spent a few weeks in the Tokyo office sharing the working experience. So, yeah, it's not, I can't give you the exact example. This is what I did. But connecting those different cultures and different organization, different society is probably definitely a net plus.
And if, someone, say for example, you did your MBA overseas, right? Someone rang you up and said, hey, Yuichi, I'm coming to Japan. I got the job running the organization in Japan, but I want to be effective as a leader in Japan. Leading in Japan, you're Japanese, you've done the whole thing. What can I do? What advice would you give someone who's coming to Japan to run an organization to be an effective leader?
Yeah,
what would you tell them to do?
I think preparation is everything.
What does that mean, though?
Yeah, so understanding the society, understanding the market, understanding the business, those preparation is very essential because, take one example from my industry. Asset management industry is global. The investors are same everywhere and investment funds are basically same everywhere. They are always looking for the highest return at the smallest risk. So it's very simple. But doing business in Japan for asset management is different from doing business in the UK or in Australia because players are different, distribution structures are different,
time frames are different.
So they shouldn't, or he or she shouldn't underestimate the locality of the market. So the first message, if I give them, is to learn about the market before coming to Japan. And second is also relating to this issue that hire nice person. Because that, he or she cannot run the business on her own or on his own.
But often they've got an existing organization here,
right,
and they get to choose the people are there, right? Yeah. So they turn up, but they're the new person. Everyone else has been doing this for a long time. They're the one coming in. So in that case, what do they do?
Ooh, that's very difficult situation.
Well, it's like you came back from the UK. You didn't get to pick the team. They'd already picked the team for you. You had to deal with who was there.
Right, yes.
And it's the same thing. They come in from overseas. The team's there. They've got to deal with the team as they are.
I think my experience is less difficult than the case you have just mentioned. I think what I did was identify what they are looking for. Was the organization looking for my experience, my expertise, or my something? So if I give that person an advice, then talk to the existing team and find out what challenge they have and what's the expectation that new leader. Then he or she can work out whether that is feasible for that person, or if he needs additional resource, or if he or she needs additional training. But if the appointment is definite, then first thing is to communicate with the existing team to find out what challenges they are facing and also what expectation they have to that particular new leader.
It's a bit of a tangential question, but I'm curious, being an Australian. You had experience in the UK. You had experience, I think you did your MBA, is it in the States, was it?
No, that was in the UK.
In the UK too, okay. So you have that experience, you have your Japan experience, then you're dealing with Australians. What was different about that? Because I always feel Australia is quite different to America. It's quite different to the UK.
Yep. Totally
Different to Japan. What have you found in your dealing with Australia has sort of been one of the unique things you find is quite different?
It's a multicultural society. My boss came from South Africa. My regular contacts came from India, and I have a very close colleague doing the similar, doing my supporting role in Australia, who is Australian. So just looking at the nationality, Frontier Advisors is a multicultural and somewhat multilinguistic organization. We have so many Asian people coming out of places like Malaysia, Indonesia, and China, and I'm joining from Japan. So comparing to the UK is also multicultural society, but I have to say Australia is a little bit more mingled. It's blended rather than a patch of different communities. Yeah. And also they recognize that Australia is a part of Asia. Probably, looking back 30 years, 40 years back, Australia used to be a part of, say, America or part of Europe. But clearly, I feel that they identify that they are part of Asia.
I think probably the Vietnam War, the late 60s, is what changed in Australia. We thought we were separated from Asia until that time. And that changed things. That changed mentality. It changed things a lot. What about your definition of leadership? How would you define leadership?
Leadership.
It's for me, because I didn't intentionally thought about the word leadership. And even though I took some leadership positions in some organizations, but I didn't think that serious about the definition. But probably, there are many explanations in the books, like like your books, the comparison between leadership, leader and the boss, and it is very simple and somewhat very boring, but leadership is to give them the direction and vision and future. So
don't worry, that's 3 important elements right there. That's more than enough. More than enough.
Good.
So, Takayama, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Fascinating chatting with you. And please join us again for our next episode of Japan's top business interviews.